Welcome to the Small Business Tax Savings Podcast, powered by Jetro. Each week, we bring extremely valuable accounting and tax tips specific to small business owners. You will be on your way to growing your business and putting more money in your pockets. Here's your host.
Hello and welcome back to another episode. Today's topic is, how does the deduction for self-employed health insurance work? Now, before we get into that, this episode is brought to you by the Tax Minimization Program, which is a training program to ensure that you pay the least amount in taxes as legally possible while having a solid bookkeeping foundation. You also have access to our team for general tax and accounting questions. It is like having an accountant in your back pocket on this entrepreneurial journey with you. Learn more at taxsavingspodcast.com/tax. I am your host, Mike Jesowshek. And again, today's topic is, how does the deduction for self-employed health insurance work? Now, this is actually going to be the first episode in our mini-series that we're calling our healthcare mini-series. So we wanted to take the time to dive into some strategies around healthcare, and that is what we're going to be doing over the next couple of weeks. When you are self-employed, your health insurance premiums for both you and your family must be treated a specific way to ensure that you get the full tax deduction for those costs. The way that your entity is set up, so whether you're a sole prop, a single member LLC, an S corporation, is going to determine how you get what you need to do to get the full deduction. So the way your entity is set up determines the correct procedure that needs to be done. So the first one we want to talk about is basically, how do I report self-employed health insurance premiums as a sole proprietor or a single member LLC? So this is for a sole proprietor or a single member LLC. This is actually basically for any entity structure outside of a C Corp or an S corporation. And this one is rather easy to do. You simply deduct your self-employed health insurance premiums on Schedule 1, line 16. There's going to be a line on your personal tax return, your personal 1040. On Schedule 1, line 16, there's a line that says self-employed health insurance deduction. So you're simply going to enter that input that self-employed health insurance premiums on that line on your Schedule 1. You're not going to take the deduction on your Schedule C or your business tax return. You're going to take it on your personal tax return form 1040, Schedule 1. So if you're not an S corporation, you're not a C corporation, it's pretty easy. You just go on that form, Schedule 1, enter the information. Now let's flip the switch a little bit. How do I report self-employed health insurance premiums as an S corporation owner? Now, this is also, of course, going to include LLCs that are taxed as an S corporation as well. So basically, anyone that's taxed as an S corporation, even if you're an LLC, taxed as an S corporation. Now, this one gets a little bit more complicated, and there's a few additional steps you need to take to ensure that you're getting the deduction for the premiums paid for you as the S corporation owner. So there's three kind of main steps that we need to do here. Step number one is have the S corporation pay for the health insurance. This can be done directly out of the business bank account, which we definitely recommend you do. Pay for that health insurance out of the business bank account, or you can reimburse yourself for that health insurance premiums through an accountable plan. We did an episode on accountable plans in the past, so check that out if you need that. But if you have been paying these premiums personally, make sure you set up an accountable plan, reimburse yourself for those premiums utilizing that accountable plan. So you're going to get a deduction or a business expense for the S corp on the S corporation side. You're going to pay for those insurance on the S corp side and get a business expense for it. Step two, we need to gross up your W-2 payroll. So we're going to need to take that insurance expense, those premiums that were paid, and add them to your payroll wages for the owner. So this is the key point. We need to make sure that those health insurance premiums are showing on the W-2 for you as the owner. Now, if your plan is non-discriminatory, then no FICA taxes need to be withheld. So this is a really cool thing. We get to add an amount to your W-2 payroll, but no FICA taxes need to be withheld. And if we're thinking about an S corporation, remember, as an S corporation, you're required to run a reasonable salary. And with an S corporation, that reasonable salary, if we're using health insurance premiums, we can use those premiums and they're going to count towards our reasonable salary, but we're also not paying FICA taxes on it. So remember, the kind of major concern with an S corporation is that the payroll piece, you have to pay FICA taxes. Now, the cool thing is non-payroll, we're avoiding FICA. But with this, we're increasing our payroll, but not having to withhold FICA, which is a really cool thing if you have a non-discriminatory plan. So we're going to gross up our W-2 payroll. We're going to add that cost of the insurance to our W-2 and make sure that there's an indication on our W-2 that includes it. If you use a software like Gusto for payroll, you just simply send a request to them at year end to make sure that this gets added. This is key that shows up on your W-2. Now, the final and third step is that we're going to deduct this on the personal tax return. So that income that was reported to you in wages for the insurance premiums on your W-2 will be deducted on your personal tax return, same way as everybody else. Schedule 1, line 16, self-employed health insurance deduction. So again, if you're set up as a sole prop or single member LLC, simply you don't take it as a business expense, you just simply deduct it on your personal tax return on Schedule 1. If you're an S corporation, there's some steps we have to jump through. We have to have the S corp pay for the insurance or reimburse yourself through an accountable plan. We need to gross up your W-2 payroll, add it to your W-2, and then you're going to deduct it on the personal tax return. Essentially, the end result is you get a deduction. So that's a great thing. There's just a few hoops that you have to jump through. You get an expense on the business tax return, but then you include it as income on your W-2, but then you get, again, a final deduction for it on your personal tax return. Now, the important thing to know is that this is just for the S corporation owners. If you have other employees or things like that, they would not follow this same treatment. This is specifically for self-employed S corp owners that we need to handle it this way. Now, question is, as we're kind of talking about other employees, how do I report insurance premiums paid for non-owner employees? So if you have employees and provide health insurance benefits either partly or fully, you're going to get a deduction for those costs. Just make sure you include that amount on the employee's W-2 in box 12 with code DD, so DD. And again, this is for non-owner employees. This would be if you have employees that you're covering health insurance for that are not owners, you would just report it on their W-2 and you get a deduction for that. What other things do you need to know about health insurance deductions or premiums and deductions? So just a few things we want to run through on this one. First, if you are part of one of those medical sharing plans, those are not technically considered health insurance. So MediShare, Christian sharing, those are not technically considered health insurance. So those would not be deductible business expenses. Those would not be part of this discussion that we're having today. Health insurance costs are 100% deductible for small business owners, even if you do not cover other employees. You just need to ensure that you're taking the deduction properly, as we kind of discussed today. So your health insurance costs are going to be 100% deductible for you as the owner, even if you're not covering other employees. You just need to make sure you're doing it right, as we kind of discussed today. Depending on your employee count, you may be required to offer health insurance. So just keep that in mind if you're kind of a bigger employer. Now, if you have employees outside of the owners, you may qualify for a small business healthcare tax credit. This credit covers up to half of your contributions toward employee premiums. Now, there's a few qualifications that you need to meet in order to qualify for this credit. Less than 25 full-time equivalent employees, average salaries of less than $50,000, you help your team with their premium payments, and you purchase them through the marketplace. So if you qualify for this, you may want to look into that small business healthcare tax credit. So that's what we wanted to talk about today. Again, we're going to be doing a little mini series here on health insurance, healthcare options, where we talk about some tax strategies when it comes around healthcare. We wanted to start this first one off about the self-employed health insurance premium. So how does the deduction work for your actual premium to pay for that health insurance if you are self-employed? Remember, if you're a sole proprietor or a single member LLC owner, you simply deduct it on your personal tax return, Schedule 1, line 16. You do not take the deduction on your Schedule C or your business tax return. If you're taxed as an S Corp, you're an S Corp owner, there's some few steps that you have to run through. You want to have the S Corp pay for the insurance. Next, you're going to gross up your W-2 payroll. You're going to add that insurance amount to your W-2 payroll. No FICA taxes need to be withheld on that if it's a non-discriminatory plan, which is great because it adds to your reasonable salary without having to pay FICA taxes. And if you have a software like Gusto or something like that, just reach out to them about these self-employed or S-Corp greater than 2% owner health insurance premiums. So have the S-Corp pay for the insurance, gross up your W-2 payroll, and then again, finally, you're going to deduct on your personal tax return, just like the sole proprietor on Schedule 1, line 16 of your personal 1040s, where you're going to get that final deduction. So a few hoops you have to jump through, but essentially you get a business deduction, you add it to your W-2, and then you get the deduction again on your personal return, which end result is you get a deduction. If you have, and again, this is for S-Corp owners. If you have non-owner employees, you're going to just take the deduction, business expense for it, and make sure you include that amount on their W-2. And then just another thing to remember is that if you're in one of those medical sharing programs, that's not technically considered health insurance, so those would not be deductible through the business. Those would not qualify. You wouldn't have to follow this process for those. So hopefully that was helpful. Again, we're going to continue this mini-series on health insurance. And finally, I have one announcement that I want to break out today. We are going to be launching and hosting our first annual Small Business Tax Savings Summit. This is going to be a 2-day long event where we're going to be diving through all sorts of tax strategies, all sorts of things to make sure that you are paying the least amount in taxes as legally possible. This summit is going to be next June 14th and 15th, and this year we're going to be doing it virtually. So it's going to be a 2-day event, over 12 hours of content. We're going to be diving through various tax strategies, things you can implement. We're going to be walking you through how you can implement them. And we're also going to be having a workbook that goes along with it that you can follow along with it. So if you're interested in joining us at our Small Business Tax Savings Summit, June 14th and 15th of 2022, it's going to be held virtually. You can sign up and find more information at taxsavingspodcast.com/summit. Now, one other thing also to note on that is that if you are a tax minimization program member, the summit is going to be included as part of your membership. So check out our summit. Again, it's June 14th through 15th. It's going to be a virtual event in 2022. Go to taxsavingspodcast.com/summit. And next week, we're going to continue our mini-series on healthcare. Thanks for listening to another episode, and I will see you next week.
This has been another episode of the Small Business Tax Savings Podcast from the team at Jetro. If you enjoy our weekly episodes, please leave a review on whatever platform you listen to us on and share with other business owners. If you have any questions or future topics you want to hear, email them to tax@jetrotax.com. Thanks for listening and have a great day.